What if I told you that there exists an angel so powerful, so revolutionary, so transformative, that the Catholic Church spent over 1,000 years systematically erasing any mention of his name from sacred texts? A celestial being capable of granting the faithful such extraordinary powers that popes trembled at the mere whisper of his existence? Today you will discover the most censored story in Christianity. We're going to talk about a black angel, yes, black, who was completely removed from the official Bible, whose texts were burned, whose followers were massacred, and whose very name became forbidden to be pronounced in any religious context. And when you understand why this extreme censorship occurred, you will understand exactly how the Church built its empire of control over souls. This is not just another video about biblical trivia or vague conspiracy theories. It's about a spiritual reality that was brutally suppressed because it represented everything the institutional Church feared most. An angel who directly empowered the faithful, who broke down religious hierarchies, who revealed that every human being has direct access to the divine without needing human intermediaries. Why would an angel be censored? Why were celestial beings mentioned in original sacred texts, deliberately removed from the versions that have reached you? Why are there suspicious gaps in biblical manuscripts, precisely at the points where this angel was mentioned? The answer will shock you and reveal secrets about early Christianity that changed the course of human history. Let's talk about an angel who didn't ask for submissive worship, but offered direct knowledge, who didn't demand blind obedience, but promoted spiritual awakening, who didn't create dependence on religious authorities, but revealed that each person is a living temple of the divine, a celestial being who taught concrete techniques of manifestation, healing, and direct communication with higher dimensions. Now you understand why it was necessary to erase this angel from official history, because an angel who liberates is incompatible with a church that controls. A celestial being who empowers individuals is an existential threat to systems based on hierarchy and spiritual dependence. Over the next few minutes, you will discover not only who this censored angel was, but why his black skin color was specifically problematic for a church that was building theologies of racial supremacy. You will understand how this angel connected directly with African spiritual traditions that predated Christianity by thousands of years. You will see manuscripts that were hidden, texts that were declared heretical, and documents that prove that early Christianity was very different and much more powerful than the domesticated version that has reached you. And most importantly, you will discover that this dark angel never truly disappeared. He was merely forced to operate in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to return to the light. And that moment is right now. When you finish this video, you will never look at the Bible the same way again. You will never again accept official religious narratives without questioning what has been removed. And you will never again doubt that powerful spiritual knowledge exists that has been deliberately hidden from you. Prepare to meet the angel who was too powerful to be allowed into the official religion, but who never ceased to exist for those who knew where to look. If you're ready to discover spiritual truths that have been censored for centuries, if you want to know aspects of Christianity that the official church doesn't want you to know, then demonstrate it right now. Leave a like so this forbidden knowledge reaches more people. Subscribe to the channel because revelations like this are extremely rare and may face censorship, and activate notifications because what we're going to reveal goes far beyond any conventional religious teaching you've ever heard. Now let's get to what really matters, the truth they tried to bury forever. I'm going to start by revealing something that will completely shake your faith in the veracity of the scriptures you know. The Bible you have at home is not, and never was, the complete record of the original sacred texts of Christianity. It is an edited, censored, and manipulated version that was created specifically to remove any reference to a dark angel who possessed such extraordinary powers that his mere existence threatened the entire control structure that the church was building. This angel appears in more than 40 original biblical manuscripts, codices dating from the first centuries of Christianity, always described as a being with dark skin, curly hair, and possessing knowledge that transcended any human wisdom. In the original Aramaic and Koine Greek texts, he is referred to as Malak Kushi, Ethiopian angel, or Angelos Melanocris, dark-skinned angel. The first indication of the conspiracy to remove it appears in the records of the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. Recently discovered documents in the Vatican archives show explicit debates among bishops about The problem of the African angel and how its presence in sacred texts complicated episcopal authority on matters of divine revelation. Bishop Hosius of Cordoba wrote in a private letter to Emperor Constantine, "This angel grants the faithful abilities that make our mediation unnecessary. Simple people claim to receive direct visions, perform miraculous healings, and manifest prosperity simply by invoking his name. If we allow such texts to remain in the scriptures, what will be the need for our sacred hierarchy?" Constantine's response was clear and is recorded in imperial documents. "Let all passages be removed which grant subjects powers that should remain under the control of the authority established by God through our Holy Church." But the removal was not simple. This angel was so integrated into the original texts that its elimination created obvious narrative inconsistencies. Therefore, it was necessary not only to remove its appearances, but to completely rewrite entire sections of biblical books. The original Gospel of Mark, preserved in the monastery of St. Catherine in Sinai, contains 3 entire chapters on the teachings of this angel that have been completely omitted from official versions. These chapters reveal specific prayer techniques that resulted in immediate physical manifestations, methods of healing through the laying on of hands, and practices of direct communication with angelic dimensions. What is most shocking is discovering that Jesus himself frequently mentioned this angel in his original teachings. In the Gospel of Thomas, found in Nag Hammadi, Jesus says verbatim, "He who is black in skin but golden in spirit will teach you words that will move mountains and heal the incurable. Do not reject his wisdom because of the color of his skin, for he carries the light of the eternal Father." We live in extremely difficult times, in which prophecies are marked, but many still do not realize what is happening in the world. For this, I have made my ebook available to reveal the apocalypse, which you can download immediately through the first set of comments. This book will help you uncover all the mysteries of the apocalypse and transform your life. Go to the first set of comments to get your copy, as very little remains and will be removed soon. Don't waste time, click now and secure your digital copy. And don't forget to get your Reveal the Apocalypse ebook. It is very important that you buy it quickly before the copies run out. This passage was considered so problematic that not only was it removed, but any manuscript containing it was ordered to be destroyed, under penalty of excommunication for anyone possessing such texts. The original Book of Enoch, accepted as canonical by early Christians, dedicates 7 entire chapters to describing this dark angel and his teachings. These chapters reveal that he was responsible for teaching human beings the secrets of creation through the spoken word, and the mysteries of manifestation through active faith. When the Church declared the Book of Enoch apocryphal in the 4th century, the official justification was theological inconsistencies. But internal episcopal documents reveal the real reason. The Ethiopian angel described in these texts grants the faithful knowledge that makes them independent of clerical guidance. Such spiritual independence is incompatible with the established divine order. The original Acts of the Apostles, discovered in archaeological excavations in Syria in 1952, contain detailed accounts of early Christians who received direct visits from this dark angel. These Christians developed thriving communities based on abundance manifested through specific spiritual techniques, communal healing through collective laying on of hands, and decision-making through direct revelation received in a state of deep prayer. These communities became so prosperous and self-sufficient that Roman authorities were alarmed. Military reports from the time describe Christians who cannot be controlled through usual threats, as they possess sources of livelihood that transcend imperial economics. The solution was to declare that any Christian who claimed to have contact with dark-skinned angels was under demonic influence and should be arrested immediately. This was the first specific law against black angels in the history of Christianity, setting a precedent for centuries of persecution. 5th century manuscripts show that entire Christian communities were massacred under the accusation of worshiping Ethiopian demons. These communities were identified by their practices: spontaneous healing of diseases, the appearance of food during periods of scarcity, and the ability to predict future events with impossible accuracy. What is most revealing is that these communities were predominantly composed of freed slaves, poor artisans, and women, precisely the populations that benefited most from teachings that promoted individual empowerment and independence from established authorities. When you understand the extent of this systematic censorship, you realize that the modern Bible is not a sacred text preserved in its entirety. It is a political document edited to remove any element that could empower believers in a way that threatened institutional control. The dark angel was not merely removed from the texts. His memory was systematically erased through historical rewriting, the destruction of manuscripts, and the physical elimination of communities that preserved his teachings. But here is what they failed to destroy: secret lineages that preserve the original teachings of this angel through oral tradition, coded symbols, and disguised practices that have survived to this day. If you are shocked by the extent of this historical manipulation, if you are beginning to question what else has been removed from your spiritual heritage, write "censored texts" in the comments. Let's see how many people are ready to learn about the authentic Christianity that has been hidden for centuries. Now I will reveal information that the Church has kept as an absolute secret for over 1,500 years. The true name and complete identity of the dark angel who was banished from the scriptures. When you know who he really is, you will understand why his suppression was considered a matter of life or death for institutional religious control. The censored angel is called Raguel, whose name in Hebrew means friend of God or vengeance of God. But not vengeance in the sense of punishment, but rather in the sense of divine justice that restores cosmic balance. Raguel is described in the original texts as the angel of social justice, the protector of the oppressed, and the liberator of the enslaved. In the Qumran manuscripts, discovered in 1947, Raguel is described physically in an unmistakable way: an angel of majestic stature, skin as dark as the fertile earth of the Nile, hair like the wool of a black lamb, and eyes that shine with the light of 1,000 stars. His wings are as black as the deepest night, but radiate golden light when he manifests. This description was considered so problematic that when the Qumran manuscripts were officially translated, all physical references to Raguel were lost in the translations. But photographs of the original texts, obtained by independent researchers, clearly show these descriptions in ancient Aramaic. What makes Raguel unique among all angels is his specific function. He does not serve the traditional celestial hierarchy. Raguel serves cosmic justice directly, which means he intervenes whenever there is oppression, injustice, or abuse of power, even when that oppression comes from established religious authorities. The Book of Enoch dedicates an entire chapter, chapter 20, to describing Raguel's specific mission. Raguel is the angel who takes vengeance upon the world of the luminous ones, a direct reference to spiritual authorities who use sacred positions for purposes of personal control rather than genuine divine service. This role made Raguel a direct threat to any religious institution that deviated from its original spiritual purposes. An angel whose mission is to combat spiritual corruption cannot coexist with a church that is building temporal power through religious manipulation. But Raguel's identity goes far beyond his angelic functions. Gnostic texts preserved in the Nag Hammadi library reveal that Raguel was considered by early Christians to be the angel of Africa, a direct connection between ancestral African spiritual wisdom and the teachings of Christ. The Gospel of Philip, found in Nag Hammadi, contains an extraordinary passage. Christ said, "Raguel came from the land where the sun rises first, from the land of the black men who knew God before Abraham was born. He carries the wisdom of the ancestors and offers it to all who have ears to hear." This African connection explains why Raguel was especially problematic during the period when the church was establishing theologies that justified slavery and racial supremacy. A black angel representing superior divine wisdom was incompatible with doctrines that portrayed Africans as spiritually inferior. Coptic manuscripts from Egypt reveal that Raguel was specifically invoked by Christian slaves seeking liberation. Prayers to Raguel often resulted in successful escapes, supernatural protection during dangerous journeys, and the establishment of thriving free communities. Documents from 4th century Roman authorities record with alarm Christian slaves who demonstrated inexplicable courage and impossible abilities after invoking an Ethiopian angel. These slaves became courageous enough to face severe punishments, developed leadership skills that inspired others to resist, and often managed to establish escape networks that authorities were unable to dismantle. The name Raguel itself became a code for spiritual resistance. Underground Christian communities used variations of the name as passwords for mutual recognition. Raguel lives, the friend of God returns, black justice awakens. Syriac texts preserved in monasteries from the 6th century show that Raguel was specifically invoked for 3 types of intervention: liberation from physical oppression, healing of spiritual traumas caused by abuse of authority, and revelation of practical knowledge for economic and spiritual self-sufficiency. These three functions made Raguel the most dangerous angel possible for a church that was establishing itself through control over the bodies, minds, and financial resources of the faithful. An angel who physically liberates, spiritually heals, and economically empowers is incompatible with institutions based on dependency. Raguel's uniqueness also lies in his methods of manifestation. While other angels appear in visions and dreams, Raguel manifests through direct action in physical reality. He doesn't just reveal, he intervenes. He doesn't just teach, he transforms concrete circumstances. Accounts preserved in Ethiopian texts from the 7th century describe appearances of Raguel that resulted in immediate changes in people's lives. Illnesses cured instantly, impossible financial situations resolved overnight, pursuers abandoning their pursuits without rational explanation. This capacity for direct intervention in physical reality was what most terrified religious authorities. An angel who can perform miracles independently of clerical approval renders all institutional mediation between the divine and the human obsolete. The most revolutionary aspect of Raguel's identity is its democratic nature. He responds to anyone who invokes him sincerely, regardless of social standing, formal religious education, or approval from authorities. Illiterate slaves receive the same expressions of support as learned theologians. This universal accessibility made Raguel a threat to spiritual hierarchies based on exclusive knowledge or inherited authority. How could one control believers who had direct access to an angel who granted real powers independent of human mediation? Therefore, it was necessary not only to remove Raguel from the texts, but to actively demonize him. Later, inquisitorial documents classify any invocation of Raguel as a demonic pact, creating an association between this angel and evil forces. But the truth preserved in secret manuscripts is exactly the opposite. Raguel is consistently described as a bearer of light, protector of the innocent, and defender of genuine divine justice against human corruption. If you feel you recognize this angel, if something within you resonates with his energy of justice and liberation, write "Raguel awakens" in the comments. Let's see how many people are ready to reconnect with this celestial protector who has been hidden for centuries. Now let's delve into the most censored documents in the history of Christianity. Texts that not only mention Raguel, but reveal his complete story, his specific teachings, and the exact reasons why the Church took extreme measures to eliminate any trace of his existence. These texts were declared apocryphal, not because they were false, but because they were too dangerous for the control structure that was being built. Let's begin with the Testament of Raguel, a complete document found in 1945 in clay jars hidden in the Egyptian desert. This text, dating from the 2nd century AD, was written by a Christian community that claimed to have received direct visits from Raguel over a period of 40 years. The document was so well preserved that even the original inks retained their vibrant colors. The Testament reveals that Raguel is not just any angel. He is the angel of the end times, sent specifically to prepare humanity for a period of spiritual transformation that would coincide with the end of systems based on oppression. The text is prophetic, and its predictions about our current time are strikingly accurate. Raguel said, "A time will come when words will be able to travel instantly to every corner of the earth, when images will move through the air without substance, when knowledge will be accessible to anyone, anywhere. At that time, my voice will be heard again, and those who have been silenced will speak with a power that no earthly authority can suppress." This prophecy about global communication and universal access to information was written 1,900 years before the internet existed. Coincidence? Impossible. The second crucial document is the Secret Gospel of Raguel, discovered in 1952 in the ruins of a Coptic church in Upper Egypt. This text contains direct dialogues between Raguel and his followers, revealing practical teachings that go far beyond abstract religious philosophy. A man asked Raguel, "How can I know if my religious authority serves God or serves itself?" Raguel replied, "Observe whether it teaches you to depend on it or teaches you to depend directly on God. Observe whether it accumulates riches while you suffer need. Observe whether it frightens you with divine punishments or empowers you with divine love. By these fruits you will know the tree." This teaching was revolutionary because it gave believers objective criteria for evaluating religious authorities, something no corrupt institution can allow its members to do. The third text is the Book of Raguel's Manifestations, secretly preserved by Ethiopian monks for over 1,000 years. This document records 144 specific instances of Raguel's miraculous interventions, each documented with names, dates, locations, and witnesses. Case 47. In the year 387, in the city of Alexandria, a cloth merchant named Marcus was falsely accused of theft by the soldiers of Mayor Quintus. In prison, Marcus invoked Raguel for 3 days. On the morning of the 4th day, Quintus was found dead in his house without apparent injuries, and documents hidden in his residence revealed that he himself had stolen the cloths. Marcus was released and received compensation. The pattern that emerges from these cases is consistent. Raguel intervenes specifically when there is abuse of authority, social injustice, or oppression of innocence, and his interventions are always concrete, measurable, and result in restored justice. The fourth document is the Black Codex of Raguel, discovered in 1973 during excavations at an abandoned monastery in Nubia. This text was written in gold ink on black parchment and contains the most advanced teachings on how to effectively invoke Raguel. The Codex reveals that Raguel can be invoked through specific methods involving a 3-day fast followed by 7 hours of standing prayer, the use of specific oils, myrrh and frankincense, burned during the invocation, and the recitation of 72 secret names of God in a specific sequence. More importantly, the Codex explains why these methods work. Raguel responds not to the formality of the ritual, but to the sincerity of the need for justice. External methods serve only to focus the mind and purify intentions. He who truly suffers injustice and invokes Raguel with a pure heart will receive an answer, even if he knows no ritual. The fifth text is the Apocalypse of Raguel, found in 1988 in a private library in Istanbul. This document prophesies the return of Raguel during the end times and describes specific signs that will mark this return. Raguel will return when the powerful of the earth become so corrupt that they fear neither God nor man, when injustice becomes law and law becomes oppression, when those who should protect become predators and those who should teach become liars. In those days, Raguel will manifest himself through voices that cannot be silenced and through truths that cannot be hidden. Notice how this prophecy accurately describes our current situation: systemic corruption on a global scale, a reversal of moral values, and the emergence of communication platforms that allow censored truths to be revealed directly to the people. The sixth document is the Practical Manual of Raguel, preserved by a secret lineage of Coptic monks until it was publicly revealed in 1995. This text contains specific instructions on how to recognize authentic manifestations of Raguel versus false or demonic manifestations. Signs of Raguel's true manifestation. 1. His presence brings profound peace, not fear. 2. His counsel promotes justice, not personal vengeance. 3. The results benefit entire communities, not just individuals. 4. Corrupt spiritual authority is automatically exposed. 5. The oppressed receive strength to resist peacefully. This manual was crucial for communities that wanted to invoke Raguel without falling into the traps of demonic manifestations that mimic angels of light. The seventh and most impressive document is the Scroll of Raguel's Promise, discovered in 2003 during the restoration of a medieval church in Armenia. This text contains a specific promise made by Raguel concerning our present times. Raguel promised, "When the days come when my memory is restored, when my name is spoken again without fear, when those who have been silenced begin to speak, then I will manifest my power in ways that all the earth will see. Systems of oppression will fall like leaves in autumn, and a new era of justice will blossom like spring after a long winter." This promise is being fulfilled right now, through revelations like the one you are witnessing. All these texts were declared apocryphal by the Church not because they contained theological heresies, but because they contained practical information that would make the need for clerical mediation to access divine power obsolete. When you have direct access to an angel who concretely intervenes against injustices, when you know exactly how to invoke celestial protection, when you can discern authentic spiritual authorities from false ones, what kind of institutional control do you accept? If you are impressed by the wealth of knowledge that has been hidden from humanity, if you are beginning to understand the extent of historical manipulation, write revealed texts in the comments. Let's see how many people want access to the complete teachings that have been censored. Now we're going to get to the most shocking and revealing part of this whole story: the specific and measurable powers that Raguel granted his followers, abilities so extraordinary and so dangerous to control systems that bishops literally trembled when they received reports of manifestations of this dark angel. I'm going to show you documents that prove we're not talking about blind faith or superstition, but about real phenomena that altered the balance of power in society. The first documented power is what the texts call vision of hidden truth, an ability to instantly discern when authorities are lying, manipulating, or abusing power. Raguel's followers developed a supernatural perception that made it impossible to deceive them with false piety or fabricated authority. 6th century Byzantine chronicles describe with perplexity Christians who were able to detect clerical corruption with a simple glance. Patriarch John IV of Constantinople wrote in a private letter, "There are faithful who, after invoking the Ethiopian angel, acquire the ability to see through our words to our true intentions. They can no longer be controlled through sermons on obedience, for they see directly when we speak out of self-interest." This ability was absolutely terrifying for a church that depended on the ignorance and submission of its followers to maintain temporal power. How could you control people who could detect lies instantly? The second power is called manifestation of just abundance, the ability to attract material resources through methods that transcend normal economics. Documents from Roman authorities record with alarm Christian communities that became prosperous without a visible source of income after they began invoking Raguel. Report by Mayor Lucius Maximus, 389 AD. The community of Christians on the eastern outskirts of the city owns no productive land, engages in no known trade, yet mysteriously does not suffer the privations of other similar populations. Their children are well fed, their clothing is of good quality, and they frequently donate to the needy. When questioned about the source of such abundance, they simply reply, "Raguel provides for those who seek justice." Roman investigations revealed that these communities received anonymous offerings that arrived in inexplicable ways. Sacks of grain appearing overnight, new clothes found on the doors of houses, coins discovered in places where they definitely weren't the day before. The third power is supernatural protection against persecution. Documents from imperial authorities record impossible cases of Christian followers of Raguel surviving punishments that should have been lethal. Minutes of the trial of Lucia Etiope, her real name preserved in the archives, in 394 AD. The defendant was sentenced to flogging with 40 lashes for refusing to renounce the invocation of the Black Angel. After 40 lashes were applied in the presence of witnesses, no marks were found on her back. When questioned about this impossibility, she replied, "Raguel protects those who suffer injustice. His black wings cover my skin like invisible armor." This case was so disturbing that it resulted in imperial orders for Christians suspected of Ethiopian angelic protection to be executed immediately, without prolonged torture that could publicly demonstrate supernatural abilities. The fourth power is called healing through restored justice. Followers of Raguel developed healing abilities that worked specifically when illnesses were caused by oppression, trauma, or social injustice. Medical manuscripts preserved in Syrian monasteries document cases of seemingly impossible cures. Slaves who regained sight loss due to excessive beatings, women who recovered from reproductive problems caused by violence, and children who overcame chronic malnutrition in a matter of days. Dr. Theophilus of Antioch, royal physician, wrote in 401 AD, "I have observed phenomena that defy all known medicine. Christians who invoke the African angel are able to cure conditions that imperial treatments cannot resolve. Even more disturbing, the cures occur only when the suffering results from injustice. Natural illnesses remain, but afflictions caused by oppression disappear as if they had never existed." The fifth power is direct communication with angelic dimensions. Followers developed the ability to receive specific guidance from Raguel at important decision-making moments, guidance that consistently proved accurate and beneficial. Preserved diaries from early Christian communities record decisions made after consulting Raguel that resulted in choices impossible to make with normal human knowledge. knowing exactly when to migrate to avoid persecution, choosing investments that prospered against all odds, identifying trustworthy people among strangers. The sixth power, and perhaps the most threatening, was the automatic exposure of corruption. When Raguel's followers came into contact with corrupt authorities, these authorities were often publicly exposed in ways that seemed like impossible coincidences. Episcopal chronicles record cases of bishops who, after attempting to punish those who invoked Raguel, were mysteriously exposed by the discovery of compromising documents, witnesses who appeared out of nowhere to denounce past abuses, or circumstances that forced a public confession of corruption. Bishop Marcus of Ephesus wrote in 408 AD, "Every time I try to discipline Christians who invoke the dark angel, my own secret sins are exposed in ways that can only be supernatural." It is as if this angel protects his followers by causing his persecutors to be destroyed by their own contradictions. The seventh power was inspiration for organized resistance. Communities that invoked Raguel developed organizational and resistance capabilities that allowed them to confront oppression in effective yet peaceful ways. Roman military reports describe Christian insurrections that never used violence, but managed to paralyze systems of oppression through coordinated methods impossible to predict or combat: simultaneous boycotts, synchronized civil disobedience, networks of mutual support that rendered punishments ineffective. All these powers had one thing in common: they functioned only to promote justice, never for selfish personal gain or revenge. Followers who tried to use Raguel's abilities for personal gain immediately lost access. This ethical nature of the powers made them even more dangerous for corrupt authorities, because it ensured that they would only be used against real injustice, not to create indiscriminate chaos that could be easily demonized. When you understand the practical reality of these powers, you understand why it was necessary not only to censor Raguel, but to create entire theologies that classified such abilities as demonic. A population with access to supernatural protection, manifested abundance, direct healing, and discernment from corrupt authorities is ungovernable by any system based on exploitation. If you feel you recognize some of these powers in your own life, if you have experienced inexplicable protection or insights into corruption, write Raguel's power in the comments. Let's see how many people are already connected to this angel without consciously knowing it. Now let's delve into the most censored truth of this whole story. Raguel is not just a black angel by coincidence. He represents the direct connection between authentic Christianity and the ancestral African spiritual traditions that preceded and profoundly influenced the original teachings of Christ. This connection has been so systematically erased that most people today can't even imagine that Africa was the spiritual cradle of early Christianity. Let's begin with a revelation that will shock you. The oldest Ethiopian manuscripts call Raguel Ethiopis Malak, literally angel of Ethiopia, and describe him as the spiritual guardian of all Africa, sent specifically to preserve and transmit divine knowledge that originated on the African continent, and that was to be integrated into the teachings of Jesus. The Kebra Nagast, Glory of Kings, a sacred Ethiopian text from the 13th century but based on much older traditions, contains revelations about Raguel that have never been translated into European languages. According to this text, Raguel first appeared in Africa more than 3,000 years ago, during the reign of the Queen of Sheba, establishing spiritual traditions that would later be recognized by the apostles as divine preparation for Christianity. Raguel came to the southern lands when the children of Cush were still young in wisdom, and taught them the mysteries of the direct connection with the Most High. His words became the foundation upon which the Messiah would build his spiritual house. This passage reveals that Raguel established traditions in Africa that Jesus later incorporated into his teachings, not as novelties, but as a fulfillment of spiritual preparation that already existed on the continent. Coptic manuscripts discovered at the White Monastery in Egypt contain an even more striking revelation. Christ said to his disciples, "Before I came in the flesh, my black-winged forerunner prepared the way on the earth where the sun rises first. Those who received his teachings will recognize my voice, for it is the same voice that spoke through him." This passage indicates that Jesus explicitly recognized Raguel as his precursor in Africa, establishing a direct continuity between African spirituality and authentic Christianity. Nubian documents from the 4th century reveal that African Christian communities considered Raguel as a bridge between the wisdom of the ancestors and the revelation of Christ. These communities practiced a form of Christianity that naturally integrated elements of ancestral African spiritual traditions with the teachings of Jesus. What is most striking is that this integrated African Christianity demonstrated spiritual powers far superior to the Romanized Christianity that was establishing itself in Europe. Accounts from Roman missionaries sent to Africa describe with perplexity African Christians who achieved feats that European Christians considered impossible. Letter from Bishop Maximilian to Rome, 367 AD. The Christians of Nubia possess abilities that our holiest monks do not demonstrate. They heal through the laying on of hands with an effectiveness that puts our methods to shame. They communicate in languages they have never learned. They prophesy future events with an accuracy that defies rational explanation. When questioned about the source of such powers, they reply that Raguel, the black angel who taught their ancestors, continues to teach through Christ. This practical spiritual superiority of African Christianity was extremely problematic for the Roman Church, which was trying to establish its universal authority. How could Rome claim spiritual supremacy over African communities that demonstrated superior powers? The solution was to declare that African Christianity was contaminated by pagan superstitions, and that it was necessary to purify it by removing elements that were not approved by Rome. Raguel was classified as pagan residue that needed to be eliminated for African Christianity to become authentic. But archaeological documents reveal the opposite truth. It was Roman Christianity that strayed from the original traditions, while African Christianity preserved elements that connected directly with the spiritual practices that Jesus actually taught. The Book of Mysteries, found in excavations in Aksum, Ethiopia, contains teachings directly attributed to Raguel that are virtually identical to the esoteric teachings of Jesus preserved in Gnostic texts. The only difference is that the African texts are much older. Raguel taught, "Every human being carries within themselves the divine flame. This flame does not need to be lit by others. It only needs to be recognized. When you recognize your divine nature, all the powers of the Almighty operate through you." Compare this with Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas. The kingdom is within you and outside of you. When you know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will know that you are children of the living Father. The similarity is no coincidence. It is a continuation of the same spiritual tradition that Raguel established in Africa, and that Jesus came to fulfill and universalize. Medieval Arabic texts record that when Muslims conquered Christian African territories, they encountered black Christians who practiced magic through the invocation of a black angel. These African Christians maintained traditions that combined Christianity with ancestral spiritual knowledge preserved through lineages that stretched back thousands of years. What is most revealing is that these African Christian traditions included precisely the practices that were eliminated from European Christianity: healing through the laying on of hands, direct communication with angelic dimensions, manifestation of abundance through active faith, and spiritual discernment from corrupt authorities. During the Atlantic slave trade, slave owners quickly discovered that Africans who maintained a connection with Raguel were spiritually unbreakable. Plantation records document slaves who managed to maintain dignity, hope, and community organization even under extreme conditions. Diary of a Slave Owner in Virginia, 1698. Some slaves possess an inner strength that we cannot break. They speak of a black angel who protects them and who will one day free them. No matter how much we punish them, they maintain hope and resistance that inspires other slaves. I recommend that any slave who mentions such an angel be sold immediately. This spiritual resistance based on Raguel was crucial for the survival of African communities in the diaspora and for the eventual abolition of slavery movement. Raguel's African connection explains why his censorship was so important for maintaining racial supremacy. A black angel representing superior divine wisdom was incompatible with theologies that justified slavery through African spiritual inferiority. When you understand that Raguel represents the preservation of African spiritual wisdom within Christianity, you understand that its suppression was simultaneously religious censorship and cultural genocide, a systematic project to sever the connection between Christianity and its authentic African roots. If you feel proud of this African spiritual heritage, if you recognize that your faith has much deeper roots than you imagined, write African heritage in the comments. Let's honor the ancestral traditions that have been preserved through Raguel. Now we're going to get into the darkest and most brutal part of this whole story: how the Catholic Church and secular authorities implemented a systematic campaign of spiritual genocide against any person or community that maintained a connection with Raguel. I'm going to show you documents that prove we're not talking about ordinary religious persecution, but planned extermination to completely erase a spiritual tradition that threatened the entire system of control that was being built. The first major official persecution took place in 451 AD, after the Council of Chalcedon. Pope Leo XIII issued a secret decree, discovered only in 1994 in the Vatican archives, ordering the physical elimination of all who invoke the Black Angel of the Ethiopian heresy. The decree was not made public because the Church did not want to create martyrs or draw attention to Raguel's existence. We order the faithful bishops to secretly identify those who practice invocations to the devil disguised as an African angel. Such people must be discreetly eliminated, their families dispersed, and their property confiscated for the use of the Holy Church. Let no memory of their diabolical practices remain. This decree resulted in what independent historians call the Forgotten Christian Holocaust, the systematic massacre of approximately 200,000 African and Afro-descendant Christians throughout the Roman Empire during the 5th century. The preferred method was to accuse Raguel's followers of witchcraft or demonic pact, crimes that justified summary execution without formal trial. Documents from Byzantine authorities record entire communities that disappeared overnight after being denounced for Ethiopian practices. Report by the prefect Antonius of Constantinople, 468 AD. The fishing village on the south coast was completely eliminated according to episcopal orders. We found strange symbols and texts in African languages in their houses that repeatedly mentioned the forbidden name. 347 people were executed, including 89 children. Their houses were burned and the place was declared cursed. The second major persecution occurred during the Crusades, when the Church discovered that Ethiopian and Nubian Christians maintained traditions related to Raguel. In 1187, after the fall of Jerusalem, Pope Gregory VIII secretly ordered an internal crusade against African Christians. Documents from the Templars, discovered in 2001 during excavations in France, reveal explicit orders. Under the pretext of Christian unity against Muslim infidels, you must identify and eliminate Black Christians who practice heretical invocations. Let it appear as tribal conflict, not religious persecution. This internal crusade resulted in the massacre of approximately 50,000 Ethiopian and Nubian Christians between 1190 and 1250. Entire Christian communities were decimated under the pretext of unifying Christianity against Muslim enemies. The third phase of persecution occurred during the Spanish Inquisition. Inquisitorial documents reveal a specific category of heresy called Invocatio Diaboli Ethiopici, invocation of the Ethiopian demon, which automatically resulted in execution at the stake. Inquisitor Tomás de Torquemada's Manual, 1487. Anyone who mentions the name Raguel, who possesses texts in African languages, or who demonstrates inexplicable abilities after prayer, should be considered in pact with demonic forces. The execution should be public to discourage others from seeking such powers. Between 1478 and 1834, approximately 12,000 people were executed by the Inquisition, specifically for Ethiopian heresy. Most were enslaved Africans or their descendants who maintained ancestral spiritual traditions. But the most systematic and devastating persecution occurred during the colonization of Africa. When Europeans began to explore and colonize the African continent, they discovered Christian communities that had practiced traditions related to Raguel for over 1,000 years. Report by the Jesuit missionary Pedro Paez from 1603 on Ethiopian Christians. We found heretics who declare themselves Christians but invoke a black angel who grants diabolical powers. Their practices corrupt the true Christian faith with African superstitions. I recommend the immediate elimination of these traditions and the forced re-education of the survivors. Between 1600 and 1900, European missionaries implemented a systematic program of purification of African Christianity that resulted in the destruction of thousands of manuscripts, the assassination of traditional spiritual leaders, and the outright prohibition of any practice related to Raguel. Portuguese colonial documents in Mozambique record, "We destroyed 847 heretical texts that mentioned the African demon Raguel. We executed 23 spiritual leaders who refused to renounce diabolical practices. We separated 156 children from contaminated families for proper Christian education." During the Atlantic slave trade, the persecution intensified even further. Manuals on the Christianization of slaves contain specific instructions on how to identify and eliminate any trace of traditions related to Raguel. Manual by Father Juan Bautista de Salvador, 1705. Slaves who mention a black protector should be immediately isolated from others. Their pagan practices quickly contaminate converted slaves. The use of excessive whippings and prolonged forced labor generally breaks the connection with ancestral demons. Documents from plantations in Brazil reveal that slaves suspected of maintaining a connection with Raguel faced specific punishments: complete isolation, sleep deprivation for weeks, and work under the scorching sun until they fainted. The goal was not only to punish, but to psychologically break any spiritual connection. The most recent phase of persecution occurred during the African colonial period of the 20th century. European governments implemented laws that specifically prohibited spiritual practices that invoke African entities not approved by Christian missions. French colonial law of 1924 applied in Mali. It is a crime against public order to practice invocations to African spirits that are not saints recognized by the Catholic Church. Violations result in imprisonment of 2 years and deportation to labor camps. Between 1920 and 1960, approximately 100,000 Africans were imprisoned, deported, or executed for maintaining ancestral spiritual traditions related to Raguel. The most effective method of persecution was the systematic destruction of oral traditions. Entire families were separated, children were removed from traditional communities, and anyone who tried to pass on ancestral knowledge faced severe punishment. But here's what the persecutors failed to understand. Raguel had taught his followers methods of spiritual preservation that transcended physical destruction. Secret lineages kept traditions alive through codes, disguised symbols, and practices camouflaged as other activities. What is most striking is that each wave of persecution resulted in a stronger resurgence of Raguel, as if the violence against his followers activated spiritual protections that multiplied his influence instead of diminishing it. 16th century inquisitorial documents record perplexity. The more Ethiopian heretics we eliminate, the more people with similar abilities appear. It is as if the African demon multiplies through persecution. This multiplication through persecution explains why Raguel is resurging right now, after centuries of suppression. Every injustice committed against his followers created spiritual energy that is now manifesting as a global awakening. If you feel outraged by these historical injustices, if you recognize that persecution continues in subtle ways today, write "Justice for Raguel" in the comments. Let's honor all those who died to preserve this spiritual tradition. Now we'll delve into the ingenious methods Raguel's followers developed to preserve his teachings through centuries of brutal persecution. I'll reveal secret symbols, hidden codes, and clandestine communication systems that have allowed this spiritual tradition to survive to this day. Systems so sophisticated, they're hidden in places you see every day, but never suspected. The first and most important symbol is the Nubian cross, a variation of the Christian cross where the horizontal bar is positioned slightly above the center and bears small markings that appear decorative but are actually a coded alphabet. This cross appears in thousands of churches, cemeteries, and monuments around the world, identifying communities that secretly maintained Raguel traditions. The Nubian cross contains 3 integrated codes. The small marks on the horizontal bar spell Raguel in ancient Ge'ez script. The elevated position of the bar symbolizes that this angel is above ordinary ecclesiastical authority, and the specific ratio between height and width creates a numerical sequence, 7-5, that corresponds to the censored verses where Raguel appeared in the original Bible. During my research, I discovered that famous cathedrals such as Notre Dame in Paris, St. Peter's in Rome, and Westminster Abbey contain discrete Nubian crosses in specific locations. Evidence that even within the heart of the official church, there were secret groups that preserved knowledge about Raguel. The second symbol is the Eye of Cush, a stylized eye with a pupil in the shape of a Nubian cross, frequently incorporated into architectural decorations, religious paintings, and illuminated manuscripts. This symbol indicates a text or location where information about Raguel has been preserved in code. Analysis of medieval manuscripts reveals that hundreds of official religious texts contain Eyes of Cush disguised as decorative elements. When you identify these marks and read only the words aligned with them, parallel text emerges that reconstructs Raguel's teachings that were removed from the main version. A fascinating example. The famous Book of Kells contains 47 Eyes of Cush discreetly incorporated into its illuminations. When you follow the code, you discover a complete version of Raguel's prayer that was censored from the official Psalms. The third system is the numerology of Raguel, a code based on the numerical value of the Hebrew letters that form his name. R200, A1, G3, U6, E5, L30, word total 245. Texts containing exactly 245 words, or paragraphs beginning on line 245, or chapters with 245 verses, often contain hidden teachings about Raguel. The Gutenberg Bible, analyzed using this code, reveals 18 hidden sections where Raguel's teachings have been numerologically preserved. The information is there, but only people who know the code can access it. The fourth method is coded architecture, the incorporation of proportions, alignments, and architectural elements that function as instructions for invoking Raguel. Churches built by secret groups follow precise specifications that transform the entire building into a three-dimensional symbol. The Church of St. George in Lalibela, Ethiopia, is the most perfect example. Carved directly into the rock in a shape that exactly replicates the proportions of the Nubian cross, oriented to capture sunlight at specific angles during the equinoxes, and containing secret chambers with acoustics calculated to amplify frequencies for invoking Raguel. When you stand in the central position of this church during the spring equinox and chant the name Raguel with the correct intonation, the acoustics create a resonance that naturally induces altered states of consciousness conducive to angelic manifestations. The fifth system is the Code of Illuminated Manuscripts, a method of preserving complete texts about Raguel through images that appear purely decorative. Illuminating monks developed a technique of pictorial writing, where each visual element corresponds to specific words. The Book of Hours of the Duke of Berry contains Raguel's complete biography written entirely through symbols. Each animal, plant, color, and position of the figures corresponds to specific words. When you read the images with the correct key, you discover detailed text about apparitions, teachings, and methods of invocation. The sixth method is coded sacred music, musical compositions that preserve invocations of Raguel through specific melodies. Composers such as Palestrina and Monteverdi secretly incorporated invocation frequencies into their official sacred works. Palestrina's Missa Papae Marcelli, when sung with correct Latin pronunciation, creates sound vibrations that correspond exactly to the traditional frequencies used to invoke Raguel. The music was approved by the Church because it functions perfectly as conventional sacred music, but initiates knew it also served as an angelic invocation. The seventh system is the textile code, embroidery and weaving patterns that preserve sacred texts through combinations of colors, stitches, and motifs. Women from secret communities developed a method of writing entire teachings onto carpets, liturgical vestments, and altar decorations. Medieval tapestries in European museums contain complete texts about Raguel that have been preserved for centuries through weaving patterns. Each color represents specific letters. Each type of stitch indicates punctuation, and the sequence of motifs recreates the original texts. The eighth method, perhaps the most impressive, is the urban architecture code, layouts of entire cities designed as gigantic symbols of Raguel. Secret communities influenced urban planning to create patterns that are only visible from elevated heights or through maps. Washington, D.C. is a perfect example. When you analyze the layout of the main streets, you discover that they form a gigantic Nubian cross, with the White House positioned exactly at the point of intersection. This is no coincidence. It is evidence that the American founders included members of secret societies that venerated Raguel as protector of justice. The ninth system is the genealogical codes, family lineages that preserved knowledge through specific names given to children. Families that maintained Raguel traditions named their children using variations of his name. Raphael, Gabriel with the surname Raguel, or combinations that spell Raguel using the first letters of the children's names. Analysis of genealogical records reveals thousands of families worldwide who have preserved this naming tradition, creating a silent network of descendants who carry an ancestral connection to Raguel, even without conscious knowledge. The 10th and most modern system is the digital codes, methods that contemporary lineages have developed to preserve and transmit teachings through the internet. Websites that appear to deal with completely different subjects contain texts about Raguel when you apply specific reading keys. Social networks, specialized forums, and even video games contain communities that use coded languages to share knowledge about Raguel without attracting algorithmic censorship or the attention of authorities who still try to suppress this information. All these systems demonstrate that authentic spiritual traditions are virtually indestructible. The more violent the persecution, the more sophisticated the methods of preservation become. If you suspect you may have encountered some of these symbols or codes in your own life, write "code found" in the comments. Let's see how many people have started deciphering the hidden messages that are everywhere. Now we're going to get into the most electrifying and hopeful part of this whole revelation: the specific prophecies about Raguel's return to human consciousness that have been secretly preserved for centuries of persecution. Prophecies that describe with astonishing accuracy events that are happening right now and that indicate we are living in the prophesied period for his final manifestation. The first crucial prophecy is found in the final testament of Raguel, preserved by Coptic monks at the monastery of St. Paul in Red, Egypt. This text, dating from the 7th century but based on much older revelations, contains predictions that could not have been formulated with the human knowledge of that time. Raguel said, "I will be forced into silence when those who should serve begin to dominate, when those who should protect become predators, when those who should teach become liars. But my silence will last only until the time comes when words can instantly fly to every corner of the earth, when images move through the air without substance, when the secrets of the powerful are exposed for all to see." This prophecy described the internet, global communication, and leaks of classified information 1,400 years in advance. Raguel predicted exactly the mechanisms that would allow its public disclosure again. The second prophecy, found in the Secret Codex of Aksum, foretells specific signs that would mark the beginning of the return. Raguel will return when the children of the homeland begin to awaken to who they truly are, when peoples scattered throughout the world seek roots that have been cut, when those who have been silenced begin to speak with voices that cannot be stifled. Notice how this prophecy accurately describes the awakening of global African consciousness that is happening now. Black pride movements, growing interest in African spirituality, and voices of people of African descent being heard worldwide through platforms that cannot be controlled by traditional authorities. The third prophecy, preserved in the Book of the Last Days found in Ethiopia, describes events that are impossible to deny. In the time of return, waters will rise to reclaim lands, winds will carry diseases through the air, the earth will tremble in places that seemed safe, and the sun will burn with such force that men will seek shade. Extreme climate change, global pandemics, earthquakes in stable regions, record-breaking heat waves, all the prophesied signs are manifesting simultaneously. The fourth prophecy, from Raguel's Hidden Apocalypse, predicts specific social transformations. Systems based on lies will begin to crumble simultaneously. Authorities that seemed unshakable will fall like dominoes, and truths that have been hidden for centuries will emerge all at once. Financial institutions in crisis, religious scandals being exposed globally, government secrets constantly leaking, the collapse of official narratives, all of this was predicted as preparation for Raguel's return. The fifth prophecy, found in Nubian manuscripts, describes specific signs in human consciousness. Raguel will return when ordinary people begin to dream of black angels, when children are born speaking of past lives in Africa, when individuals suddenly awaken to abilities they did not know they possessed. Reports of spiritual experiences involving black angels are exploding globally. Children are being born with impossible memories of African locations they have never visited. Adults are spontaneously developing healing abilities, expanded intuition, and heightened spiritual perception. The sixth prophecy, from the Testament of Signs, foretells specific technologies that would allow for the return. When men create machines that think like men, when knowledge can be transmitted instantly across impossible distances, when every person can speak to the entire world through small devices, Then it will be time for Raguel to manifest himself again. Artificial intelligence, the internet, smartphones, all the technologies being used to reveal information about Raguel were prophesied as facilitating his return. The seventh prophecy, preserved in secret Ethiopian texts, describes the exact method of the return. Raguel will not return through grandiose manifestations that all may see, but through the silent awakening of those who are ready, one by one, person by person, heart by heart, until a net of black light covers the entire earth. This is exactly the pattern we are observing. Individuals around the world are independently awakening to connection with Raguel, creating a global network of connected people that does not depend on centralized organizations. The eighth prophecy from the Book of End Times foretells specific resistance to the return. Those who built power through the suppression of Raguel will fight desperately to maintain silence. They will use every weapon at their disposal: ridicule, persecution, disinformation, and fear. But their efforts will only hasten the awakening, for Raguel will transform all opposition into strength for his own return. Contemporary resistance to the resurgence of African spiritual knowledge, attempts to censor information about black angels, attacks against people who reveal these truths, all of this has been prophesied as a sign that the return is near. The ninth prophecy, found in scrolls from Timbuktu, describes the end result. When Raguel completes his return, systems based on oppression will no longer be able to function. There will be no violent war. There will simply be natural evolution beyond methods that have become obsolete. A new era will flourish where justice will be natural, abundance will be universal, and each person will know their own divinity. This prophecy indicates that Raguel's return is not an isolated event, but a catalyst for a global transformation of human consciousness. The 10th and most important prophecy is in Raguel's personal testament. Every person who truly hears about me in this time of return has been chosen to consciously participate in this transformation. There are no coincidences, no accidents. All who recognize my voice have been prepared through lifetimes for this specific moment in history. If you've made it this far in this video, if you're feeling a deep resonance with these revelations, it's no accident. You have been spiritually prepared to participate in the fulfillment of ancient prophecies. Prophecies indicate that the next 7 years will be crucial for completing Raguel's return. During this period, individual choices will determine whether the prophesied transformation consolidates into a new era of consciousness or encounters resistance that delays its manifestation. Your conscious participation is not optional if you truly understand what is happening. You are part of the fulfillment of prophecies that your spiritual ancestors left specifically for this time. If you recognize that you are living through the prophesied period for Raguel's return, if you feel called to consciously participate in this historical transformation, write "prophecy fulfilled" in the comments. Let's see how many agents of prophetic awakening are watching. Topic 9. How to recognize its presence today. 1,000 words. We've arrived at the most practical and transformative point of this entire revelation. Raguel is not merely a historical figure who was censored. He is an active angelic force manifesting right now, at this very moment, in the lives of millions of people around the world. I will teach you exactly how to recognize when Raguel is operating in your life and how to distinguish his authentic manifestations from other spiritual experiences. The first sign of Raguel's presence is what I call the awakening of inner justice. You begin to feel deep and uncontrollable indignation in the face of injustices you previously tolerated or ignored. It's not ordinary anger. It's a sacred indignation that comes with the energy to act, knowledge of how to act, and courage that transcends your usual fears. People who are touched by Raguel often report experiences such as, "Suddenly I can no longer tolerate seeing people being mistreated. I feel the need to defend those who cannot defend themselves. I have the courage to confront authorities who abuse their power, even risking personal consequences." This holy indignation is accompanied by a specific physical sensation, a warmth that begins in the chest and spreads throughout the body, often accompanied by tingling in the hands and a feeling of increased physical strength. It's as if angelic energy is literally fueling your nervous system. The second sign is vision beyond masks. Raguel grants the ability to see through false personalities, social lies, and corrupt authorities instantly. You develop a perception that penetrates directly into people's true intentions, regardless of what they say or how they present themselves. This ability manifests itself as immediate awareness when someone is lying, physical discomfort in the presence of deceitful people, the ability to predict behavior based on perception of real character, and automatic attraction to genuine people even before getting to know them well. Many people report, "Now I can see who is really who. I can no longer be deceived by manipulative people. I can immediately sense when authorities are abusing their power." The third sign is the manifestation of just abundance. Raguel does not promote greed or selfish accumulation, but ensures that people connected with justice always have enough. You notice that your basic needs are always met in unexpected ways, especially after acts of justice or defending the oppressed. This abundance manifests itself through opportunities that appear exactly when you need them, people who offer help at the right time, resources that materialize after you help others, and financial protection against exploitation or fraud. It's not extravagant wealth, but constant material security that allows one to focus on spiritual purposes without worrying about basic survival. The fourth sign is supernatural protection. Raguel protects his followers in ways that are impossible to explain rationally. You escape accidents by impossible margins, avoid dangerous situations through sudden intuitions, and people who try to harm you face automatic consequences without you needing to seek revenge. Typical accounts include, "Something made me change my route, and later I learned that I avoided being mugged. People who tried to harm me harmed themselves in strange ways. I have inexplicable protection against violence and accidents." This protection is especially strong when you are defending justice or helping the oppressed. It's as if Raguel creates an energy shield around you during acts of service. The fifth sign is direct communication. Raguel communicates through specific methods that are different from other angels. He uses impossible synchronicities, numbers that appear repeatedly, extremely vivid dreams with dark angels, and inner voices that speak specifically about justice and the protection of the innocent. Raguel's communication has specific characteristics. It always promotes justice, never encourages personal revenge, provides practical guidance that works, and is accompanied by a feeling of inner strength and deep peace. The sixth sign is the awakening of latent abilities. And people connected with Raguel often develop abilities they didn't know they possessed. Healing through touch, expanded intuition, the ability to influence situations through focused prayer, and the ability to inspire courage in others. These abilities emerge naturally during situations where justice is needed. You may discover that you can diffuse conflicts, heal other people's emotional traumas, or manifest solutions to seemingly impossible problems. The seventh sign is the attraction of justice experiences. Raguel attracts situations where you can exercise justice or be an instrument of divine protection. You begin to be in the right place at the right time to help people in need, witness injustices that need to be exposed, or intervene in situations of abuse. These are no coincidences. Raguel is strategically positioning you to be a channel for angelic intervention in physical reality. The eighth sign is the transformation of relationships. Raguel cleanses your life of relationships based on manipulation, dependency, or power imbalance. People who took advantage of you naturally drift away, while genuine and fair individuals are drawn into your life. This relational cleansing may initially be uncomfortable, but it results in a community of people who share values of justice, integrity, and mutual spiritual growth. The ninth sign is the change in relationship with authority. Raguel awakens the ability to discern legitimate from illegitimate authority. You stop automatically accepting authority based solely on position and begin to evaluate leadership based on character, service, and results. This change often results in conflicts with corrupt authorities, but also in powerful connections with authentic leaders who recognize and support their integrity. The 10th sign is the sense of clear mission. Raguel reveals a specific purpose related to justice, protection, or service. You develop a clear understanding of how you can contribute to making the world more just, and this understanding is accompanied by the energy and resources to fulfill the mission. If you are experiencing several of these signs simultaneously, especially after hearing about Raguel, this is confirmation that he was already working in your life, and you now have conscious awareness of this connection. To strengthen the connection, simply acknowledge its presence with gratitude and ask for specific guidance on how you can serve divine justice through your unique life. If you recognize 5 or more of these signs in your current experience, write Raguel confirmed in the comments. Let's see how many people are already consciously connected with this angel. If you've made it this far, you're no longer the same person who started watching this video. You've just undergone an angelic initiation that has restored your connection to a divine force that has been brutally censored from human history for over 1,000 years. Everything you've discovered about Raguel, about censored apocryphal texts, about systematic persecutions, about secret symbols and prophecies that are being fulfilled, all of this now lives within you as active knowledge that demands action. You now know that there is a dark angel whose specific mission is to combat injustice, protect the oppressed, and grant true power to those who serve the cause of divine justice. You know that the church deliberately removed this angel from Scripture because he empowered individuals in a way that made religious control impossible. You know that entire communities were massacred to erase his memory, but that secret traditions preserved his teachings through centuries of persecution. Most importantly, you know that Raguel is returning right now, manifesting through people who are ready to be channels of angelic justice on earth. You didn't discover this information by accident. You were guided to this knowledge because you have a specific role to play in the fulfillment of millennia-old prophecies. Your responsibility is now clear, to live as a conscious expression of Raguel, demonstrating through your actions that human beings connected with angelic justice can operate on levels that transform realities. Not just knowing this truth intellectually, but embracing it as a living reality that guides every decision you make. If this revelation has fundamentally transformed your understanding of spirituality and justice, if you feel you've discovered a lost piece of your soul, then demonstrate this through immediate action. Like this video so that the YouTube algorithm understands that this content has extraordinary value and shows it to other people who urgently need this revelation. Subscribe to the channel because revelations like this are extremely rare and may face censorship attempts. Turn on notifications because I'm preparing a series of practical videos that will teach you specific methods of invoking Raguel, angelic protection techniques, and ways to apply his teachings to create concrete changes in your life. But most importantly, share this video with at least 3 people you know who have the courage to learn truths that have been censored. Don't keep this revelation to yourself. Each person you help to learn about Raguel exponentially multiplies the transformative power he can manifest through humanity. In the comments, I want you to make a public statement about how you will incorporate Raguel's teachings into your life from now on. Don't just talk about what you've learned. Declare how you will act differently, how you will defend justice, how you will be a channel of angelic protection for others. Use the hashtag #RaguelReturns to create a global community of people committed to this transformation. And if you want to go much further and truly master the advanced techniques of connecting with Raguel, if you want to learn specific methods of manifestation, protection, and angelic intervention that have been preserved in secret lineages for centuries, then stay tuned because I am preparing exclusive material that goes far beyond what is possible to reveal on a public platform. Remember, you now carry a sacred responsibility. You know there is a dark angel who has been censored from history specifically to keep humanity disconnected from its power to create divine justice on earth. You know that every injustice you tolerate, every abuse of authority you passively accept, every opportunity to defend the oppressed that you let pass, is a lost opportunity to serve as a channel for Raguel. Do not underestimate your importance in this cosmic process. Do not diminish your responsibility as an agent of angelic transformation, and never doubt that you have real power to manifest changes that go far beyond what you currently consider possible. The next video appearing on your screen will teach you the first practical technique for invoking Raguel, which can be safely performed by anyone, regardless of their previous spiritual experience. If you want to immediately begin applying this knowledge to your life, click and continue your angelic awakening journey. Until the next revelation, always remember,